Right, time for our next happy and upbeat video. Let's find out what today's topic is all about. We are talking about the world's scariest torture devices. This sounds like a wholesome topic today, ladies and gentlemen. Hello! Welcome to Brain Spill, the laziest show on the internet. My name is Tank, and I hope you've eaten your dinner because what we're going to be talking about today might just make your stomach turn. We are going to be exploring some torture devices today used throughout history, some of which, or let's be fair, most of which, will be ones which are pretty nasty. So this is your one chance to go to another video of mine if this topic isn't for you. Yes, so you ready? Let's get to it. And I just want to start by saying, oh my god, some of these devices are absolutely horrifying. Today we start with a rather unique torture device, something which, if I was given the choice, this is one that I probably wouldn't opt for. This is called the Brazen Bull. A large bronze or brazen bull was cast and created in ancient Greece. The bull was full-sized, with a single door leading inside to a hollowed-out body where your individual would be locked inside, for whatever reason they were being tortured for. Just by that description alone, you might be able to gather where this might be going. Basically, the individual climbs inside the bull, the door is shut, and underneath the bull is a large fire, which, once it gets going, the metal outside of the bull starts heating up, which essentially cooks anything that's inside of it, including anyone that might be currently inside that bull. In legend, it was said that the device was acoustically altered, so the screams of the victim would sound out the bull's screech instead. This sounds absolutely awful, and what's even stranger about all of this is, even though people believe this is an actual torture device that existed, one has never actually been found historically from ancient Greece, which makes you question why I've put this in the video, but it's just something which I thought I'd mention because it's a pretty nasty way to go. A lot of people thought that this might have been a piece of propaganda that they used to use back in the day to try and, convince people not to commit crimes, because if they knew that they were going to get cooked inside that thing, then people might think twice before stealing that loaf of bread. And, well, if I saw that on a poster back in the day, it probably would have done the job because I would have been absolutely terrified. Although archaeologists have found little to no evidence of the existence of such a device, the sheer fact that humans can be so cruel to even think up of an idea like this might not be too unbelievable. So yeah, that's just one of the many torture ways that people have previously thought of, including being cooked inside a giant bull, which is bad in itself. However, the device we're going to be talking about next is terrifying mainly because of the fact we know it exists. And we know it exists because we have the physical devices today. And by devices, what I mean is a bucket of rats. Let me explain. The torture victim would be tied down and rats would be placed on their chest with a bucket or cage placed on top. Then hot coals would be poured onto the cage or bucket, heating up the container and causing the rats to panic inside, trying to find a way out. And, well, you can't chew through a metal bucket, so if you're trapped there, there's only one other way you're getting out of there. A common torture method used, it was simple but effective. It originated from ancient Rome but had actually been documented from the Dutch revolt during the 17th century and documented some uses of the method in South American countries between the years of 1964 and 1990. Yes, you heard me correctly, 1990, that was barely 30 years ago, to say that people were still using this as a torture method, and who knows, it might even still be used in some parts of the world today. We just don't know. Well, I mean, clearly it sounds like the simple way is the most effective way. Just get a bucket, get some rats, and get some hot coals, and you can torture anyone. As you can imagine, a lot of the time, if they wanted to interrogate someone for information, this would have been an ideal way to go about it. You don't even need to go all the way through with it. With the prospect of rats burrowing inside your abdomen, you're going to spill the beans pretty quickly. Yes, I did warn you beforehand, this topic gets pretty grisly, and there's more to come, because if you're in a certain place where you can't get ready access to a giant bronze bull or a bunch of rats, then you need to think creatively, and this was a particular problem if you were at sea. And people got pretty inventive with their torture ways. If you're a sailor that was mutinous, then of course you needed to be taught a lesson. Aside from cleaning the poop deck, a common method of torture was called keel hauling, which I assume for the longest time was just a really cool Ailstorm song, but no, it's in fact a torture method. Used throughout the history of naval life until the 19th century, the victim would be stripped and tied so they cannot swim, with chains being tied around them to bound them in place. Then they would be fastened to 2 ropes, one from their back to the wide arm of the mast, and the other went from the victim all the way under the ship itself. Then all that would need to happen is top push the victim onto the water, which would allow them to be dragged under the waves. Now, this form of punishment was not so much to try and drown the person that was being pushed in the water, but the real risk here is that once you're pushed under and you go under the boat, you would be scraping along the bottom of the ship's hull, which basically has loads of overgrown barnacles and sea life on, which, if you don't know, is pretty hard and it can cut you up pretty badly. The cuts received from this contact would likely cause severe injuries and blood loss, but also the loss of limbs in some pretty nasty cases, with even being cases of there being decapitation. So I guess a lot of this is down to luck, where you get dropped and when you get dragged back on that you haven't suffered too many injuries. Moving swiftly on to the breaking wheel, which, as far as naming goes, this goes straight to the point. You are literally tied to a giant wheel of a wagon, and for those that don't know, these wheels are pretty damn big. This form of torture would involve the breaking of bones over the course of days, a very public form of torture used in the 19th century Europe, and eventually would lead to a slow death. This punishment was normally reserved for serious crimes, such as murder, but was also apparently a punishment for being suspected, yes, suspected, of carrying the plague. Yes, something that you had little to no control over most of the time. So even if you were suspected to have it, you'd be pretty much guaranteed that you're going on that wagon. Something that's particularly nasty about this is that archaeologists have even found human remains that have been absolutely smashed to pieces under the presumption that they were victims of this torture method, which is not great because a lot of the time they were still alive whilst they were having this torture pod on them. Things are about to get even more messed up because we're going to be talking about a torture method called the Judas Cradle. It's so messed up, in fact, I'm going to tell you what they did and leave the rest to your imagination. This is the Judas Cradle, and I know what you're thinking, that spiky boy sure looks uncomfortable. Well, it is. And the real scary thing about this is that the victim would be suspended above the spike and they would sit on top of it with their limbs bound together so they couldn't move. Then weights would slowly be applied to the victim, making them ever so surely more heavy over time, while sitting on this thing, of course. And well, I'm pretty sure you can guess what happened next. As far as we're aware, this torture method was used largely in Europe during the 16th century, like most of the torture devices on this list, which is crazy and just goes to show how goddamn horrendous humans are. This particular torture, where you're sat on this spiky boy, would last days on end, and basically you'd just have to endure it for as long as you could. This punishment was not intended to outright kill someone. As a matter of fact, it probably would have been more merciful if it did. The purpose was for lifelong mutilation, a punishment reserved for people who've committed crimes such as adultery, rape, or being a homosexual. Cause, yeah, people had some pretty messed up thoughts back in the day, and they thought an appropriate response to being a homosexual was to sit them on this thing. Also, apparently they never actually cleaned the device after every use, so even if you weren't that severely injured, you might get a pretty bad infection from this, which, back in the day, if you got an infection, there was probably a very slim chance you'd live anyway. Either that, or your arsehole would just be in the shape of a pyramid, either way. God, there's so many to choose from. Let's pick this one, the Iron Maiden, which most people would know that as a really cool metal band, but they're actually based off a torture device called the Iron Maiden. This torture device has gained renown in pop culture and in many movies. The victim would be placed inside a large metal tomb, which would be shut with them inside. This is bad because on the inside of it, there are large metallic spikes which would pierce the victim inside, not only going through you but would likely cause you to bleed out if you were left inside of it for a prolonged period of time, which people of course were. And, well, I mean, there's so many things we could pick from here. There's some pretty nasty ways to go. And I think, with the amount of torture devices there is, this might have to be a multiple part episode. Maybe in the future, I might have to make a part 2 to this if you sick people want me to talk about this even more, because there's something strangely fascinating about these horrendous devices. People are pretty messed up. I think we can take it away and say that there's a lot of things on this list and we can't be sat here for hours talking about every single gruesome way that you could be tortured or killed. If this is a video that you guys do want me to talk about again, do let me know down below, because if so, I will bump it up on the schedule and see if I can get this recorded sooner rather than later. Trust me, there's some torture methods I left out in this video, mainly because of how absolutely effed up they are, so if you want to hear about them, you know what to do. A great way to spend a Sunday afternoon. If you liked the video, be sure to like and subscribe. If you want to be notified as soon as I upload my next video, be sure to hit the bell button. And if you've got any ideas for what topics you'd like me to discuss next, let me know down in the comments below. As always, sources used in the video will be in the description. Another torture method which I know personally works is by watching the marathon playlist on this channel, mainly because it is a playlist of every single video I've ever made for the Brain Spill channel, and if by the end of it you haven't lost your mind, then you have iron fortitude, my friend. But I'm going to leave that in your capable hands. I'll see you guys in the next video. Fantastic.